now we get to the fun part. We talk about the external business challenges that retailers are facing and what is causing them to address agility, resilience, and sustainability. Well, consumer-facing businesses are focused on sustainable growth, and that's most of that is by maintaining a focus on both the customer and the supply chain. No great surprise there. That's what retailers do all the time. They focus on both the supply side of their business and on the selling side of the business. But we observed that while over the prior 30 years, the supplier side has been hyper-optimized to reduce cost, it came at the expense of resiliency and agility. And now that they're faced with new risks revealed during the pandemic, both retailers and suppliers are really struggling to adapt to these new conditions. This is what gets us back to this notion of a supply network. What is perhaps an even bigger reveal is that retailers are even more focused on the fact that consumers have very different shopping behaviors than they did in the past, and they in fact can find whatever they want anywhere in the world at the price they're willing to pay for it just by looking at their iPhone. This is a really big change for retailers, and they continue to struggle with it. Now, what that means, let's get into that a little bit. They're worried about the supply chain, of course, but they're also worried about us, the consumer. And what they're really worried about is that consumers can buy products from anywhere using their personal technology. We broke this down by vertical because there's some fascinating differences that coincide rather neatly with what they sell in the marketplace. Grocers and drugstores and convenience stores are most concerned about that because the switching costs for us all to go from grocery A to grocery B is very, very low. And it's very, very easy to cut an order in Ocado and get a direct delivery. So retailers who are in that vertical are really concerned about it. General merchants, these are the folks that sell consumer products. Think of those as the big box stores. They're also very concerned about it because they know that the products that they are selling are in no way different than the thing you can get across the street. Fashion and specialty merchants, they're least concerned about that because, of course, they sell bespoke fashion. And hard goods retailers, somewhere in between. Now, we also asked retailers to identify how consumers start their shopping journey. And you can see that this is not great news. 27% of the time, they're going to go to Amazon, Google, 12%, social media, 2%. If you add those numbers up, you're getting close to 50% pretty fast. And if you look at it from the other perspective, they believe consumers start their shopping journey in the store at 38% or on the retailer website, 20%. So what that means is something approaching 50% is started in a user interface that's beyond the control of the retailer. And they're worried about it, as they should be. Consumers have choices, and they take advantage of those choices. So these turn into operational challenges. We asked what the top 3 operational challenges your company faces as it relates to agility, sustainability, and resilience. Now, in RSR studies, we only let them choose 3. So if it's above 33%, we know it's pretty important. And you can see what retailers are weighting in this question that we asked. Number 1, as we've been talking about, is optimizing the supply chain network for maximum profitability and to be able to dynamically determine the best fulfillment option for pickup delivery to customers, evaluating the longevity and impact of any disruption, finding optimal customer-facing employees, and on down the line. You can see these are really, really important differences. But let's take a look at the difference between winners and everybody else. This was fascinating. Winners are more concerned about optimizing the supply chain for maximum profitability, and others are worried about dynamically determining the best fulfillment option for pickup and delivery by customers. Now that's fascinating. Winners, this goes back to something that happened when I was in retail many, many years ago in the 1980s. Companies like Walmart were hyper-optimizing their supply chain so that they could deliver goods at a lower unit cost of goods and turn those over as price savings to consumers. They're still worried about that. Winners still try that to maintain all the advantages they got in the supply chains of the 1980s and 1990s, but in a much more agile and resilient way. Average underperformers are aware of the issue, but they're more aware, or they're more worried about something operationally internal to their business. And that's how to find the best fulfillment option for pickup and delivery. So winners haven't lost focus on the need to optimize the supply chain or to deliver the best unit cost of goods. Average and underperformers are focused on shaking costs out of customer order fulfillment. Very, very different focus here. So the challenges are big. How do we turn those challenges into opportunities? Well, the good news is there's lots of opportunity, and many of them are technology driven. So we'll talk a little bit about those. Again, we have another top 3 question. I'll remind you that if it's over 33%, we know it's important. And here's what we found out. Retailers in general are still concerned about improving the profitability of omnichannel. Omnichannel has introduced whole new costs to retailers, and they are trying to figure out how to be able to deliver goods to customers at the prices they expect, deliver it with the services they expect, and not destroy the profitability of the business. They also are worried about optimizing the return on inventory investment. They want better inventory balance throughout the chain. They want more customer intelligence. They want to understand the way customers are utilizing the brand. They want to have an improved understanding of customer movement within the stores themselves. And they're going to do that by making CRM more actionable to them. Faster, more efficient, and resilient supply chain network, and taking advantage of new selling opportunities. All of these things are important to retailers, and all of them are made possible by more location-aware capabilities. There's some differences of opinion, however. Let's take a look at this. This was fascinating. This is really driven by the type of products that retailers are selling. Again, FMCG is grocers, drugstores, and convenience stores. General merchandise, of course, is general merchandise, and fashion is fashion. So general merchants are most concerned about a faster and more efficient and resilient supply chain network. Of course, those are the companies that work most closely with CPGs. They are worried about getting that supply chain to work at the speed of consumption. Now, FMCG retailers who perhaps were laggards when it came to CRM in the past are making good use of it now, and they're very, very interested in turning CRM into an opportunity for them. If you shop at, I'm trying to think of a grocer that would be good to bring as a representation. In my particular market, they're starting to send me digital coupons for things that I actually care about. I like that. When I'm thinking about the UK market, I think about dunnhumby, which is actually a consulting firm, has worked with several of the large retailers over there to help them to make the stores more in tune with the markets that they serve, the micro markets that they serve. This is a good example of that. Improved customer intelligence. Well, fashion wants to know about that because, of course, there are brand loyal customers. They want to be able to serve them in the best way possible. The best example I can think of in the industry right now isn't actually selling fashion. They're selling cosmetics. It's called Ulta Beauty. And they have a world-class CRM capability that if you haven't read about, you should check into. They're really making great use of it. But fashion merchants really want to use CRM and customer intelligence to be able to drive their businesses much harder than they used to. And finally, of course, the optimized return on investment, FMCG. Those are the retailers that sell things that have very, very short life cycles on the shelves. They want to be able to turn that inventory much faster. They want better inventory balance. They want less of the things that sell too slow. And they want to focus their merchandise on those things that consumers actually want to buy. So it's all really interesting, difference of opinion. Now, when we talk about where are they in making some of these things happen, you might recall that I said that there's lots of opportunity and there's a lot of progress. And this is where you start to see some of the progress that is being made. So when we ask retailers to rate their company's supply chain capabilities, and we ask particularly about those things that are in development or under construction, here's what we learned. They wanted to, number one, they're focusing on product or assortment flexibility. They're kind of moving away from the one-size-fits-all assortments to something much more localized, and they're very focused on that. This gets to the inventory balance issue we were just chatting about. The ability to source products closer to home, the ability to execute alternative sourcing strategies, all of these things are important. Expanding their customer order fulfillment network to include third parties, and et cetera. There's that thing that I mentioned in the very beginning, predictive modeling. That is a winning behavior. Overperformers are much more focused on it than average and underperformers are. Rapid allocation, replenishment, smaller quantities, more frequent replenishments. This is important to them. Faster product life cycles, very closely related to that. And moving away from supply chains and towards supply networks. These are all things that retailers are working on hard and heavy. They're spending tremendously on it, and they're trying to make this happen. This gets towards agility and resilience. Now, we asked retailers to also rate the importance of the following to strengthen operational effectiveness. Operational effectiveness is never far from retailers' minds. Of course, those of you who are in the industry know that finding those pennies and nickels and dimes are really, really important, because you want to bring more of that to the bottom line. What's the focus now? Well, both winners and others are focused on determining the changes in consumer buying patterns. That's really being driven by consumer adoption of technology. And right behind that, you can see is optimized supply networks. Retail winners and average and underperformers all agree on these things. However, there's some big differences of opinion in other areas. Supply chain network planning and optimization, both globally and domestically, is a winning behavior. Facilities management, determine new selling formats that might work better under a variety of local conditions. These are all things that retail winners are focusing in on that average underperformers are not. As it relates to resilience, we ask retailers to rank the importance of various factors. And you can see this is very clearly a winner's story. Winners want to understand traffic patterns at at-risk locations. They want to focus more on workforce equity and inclusion, risk analysis, business continuity planning, health and wellness of the teams, assessing and stabilizing operations at the home office. All of these things are important. Kind of disappointingly, down at the bottom of the list, although the numbers still seem high, climate risk analysis and remote operations at a hyper-local level. These are all really important things, but the one fact you can take from this particular slide is that winners are focused much more on it than average and underperformers are. So that brings us through the business challenges and the opportunities that come from those challenges. I'm going to stop talking now and turn it over to my partner, Steve Rowen, who's going to talk about the things that stand in the way of retailers addressing these issues meaningfully, and which technologies can be utilized to address the challenges or seize the opportunities. So Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Brian. And there are no shortage of things that are standing in the way of retailers being able to take advantage of a lot of these opportunities that Brian has so eloquently walked us through. Eloquently? That's a better way of saying that. Let's jump ahead one slide and dig into what they might be. So for those of you of a certain age, you'll recognize this particular graphic as Fred Flintstone's vehicle of choice. And the reason we selected this is because old technology and old ways of thinking will not get retailers to where they need to be. There's an old saying here that, what got you there, what got you here won't get you there. And this is certainly the case as it relates to agility, sustainability, and resiliency. You can see when we asked retailers to self-identify what are the very, top things standing in your way of grabbing a hold of some of the value that you've just identified. The number one thing is that our technology is not equipped to support new business models. Brian noted a few minutes ago that because when we ask retailers to choose the top 3 from a long list, anytime you see something above 33%, it should really raise your eyebrows. This really raised our eyebrows. Retailers are well aware of the pickle that they've gotten themselves in by not investing fairly regularly. Prior to, say, 2018, 2019, most retailers were fairly happy to sort of sit on their hands and say, well, let's see what the next technology is before we invest wholeheartedly in any new thing. And as we all know, when 2020 rolled around and the pandemic accelerated consumers' appetite for goods, ability to use technology, some would say there has been a global decline in patience on the part of consumers. We have research to certainly show us that that is the case. All of these things combined to create a perfect storm where retailers were caught in a really compromised position where consumers were demanding modernity and retailers were stuck in a world where they had technologies that were not going to work and play well. And that has risen to the top here. Brian already talked a little bit about the fact that business leadership prefers to run by gut feel. That is slowly and steadily on its way out in virtually all the research we conduct. We did a report last year where we dug into KPIs. What are retailers using as indicators to let them know whether they're doing a good job or a bad job these days? And yes, there are certainly bastions, particularly segments, certain product segments in particular, where retailers feel the gut feel is the only thing that's going to enable us to determine how we're going to meet customers' demands. That thinking is on its way out as new technologies emerge that, quite frankly, can tell us more about ourselves than we probably knew as a people. And the third one worth calling down here, the fact that there is no clear business owner to champion new analytics and insights. That's a big deal. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, is showing up more and more from one report to another in the research that we're writing, is that sure, even if the vendor community does a really good job of explaining to us the value of some of these new tools and what we could leverage by bringing them in-house, it doesn't necessarily mean we have the right listeners on our side in order to champion the need to bring these certain things in. Not only which ones to choose from the long list of very capable technologies, but which ones we need in the first place, which categories of technologies we need in the first place. And that's a big deal. So as we jump ahead, there'd be no value in this unless we ask retailers, okay, you've painted a fairly grim picture here. How do you self-identify means to get through this? So this slide here shows us what retailers think are the ways to get through the slide we just saw. Whole host of problems, fairly straightforward path to get past them. Number one, and again, this is showing up with a higher increasing frequency year over year, is that retailers recognize data quality is the linchpin to every good decision they need to make. They've been collecting all kinds of data from customers, from stores, from vendors, from suppliers, from every single source that they can possibly pull data from. And yet there is a dubious nature at best to what of that can be trusted and how actionable a lot of that data is. That is the cornerstone of what we're calling this holy trinity for a way forward. There's the data itself from which all other things flow. There's the analytics that sit alongside that data to help retailers to determine what they're going to do, hopefully, best case scenario, in real time. And then the third part of the triangle really is the business analytics that will then measure how effective those decisions were. And in an ideal world, these things feed into one another. We collect data about customers, products, flow, whatever particular issue is at hand. We have analytics that then make sense of that data, tell us what to do, and then we have another layer of analytics that sit on top of that that tell us how we did. This is the virtuous cycle. And it's something that for us, having done this for 17 years now, and having spent probably the first 10 to 12 of those years barking a little bit and trying really hard not to chastise retailers too much about the data issues that were so clearly underlying every decision they were making in the early part of the century. For us, it's a welcome bit of information for us to see that retailers have landed on, okay, we get what the problem is, we get how we're going to get out of it. Now, this does not alleviate what they showed us in the previous slide about we still need to find someone internally who can champion these things. We still need to, update our technology stack so that anything that we have that is actually working for us doesn't clash and interfere with any new technologies that we roll in. But at least the understanding is there. And, knowing is half the battle, I believe they say. So this is a positive step forward, particularly when if you were to compare this data to research that we might have done 5 or 6 years ago, this level of comprehension was not there. So we were quite heartened to see this. So retailers know what they got to do. The question is, what are they going to do? They know what they got to do. The question is, how are they going to do it? How are they going to invest? Which technologies are at the top of their list? Which do not curry much favor? Which have they grown jaded about? Because if you're a retailer and you're listening to this, I'm sure you've probably had your fair share of experiences where a vendor may potentially have overpromised what one particular solution set might be able to do, only to have it fall a bit flat. So this is an area where in our research, we really try to focus on being pragmatic. We ask retailers, what are the value in a very long list of technologies? And then what are you actually doing? What are you using? What are you using and getting ready to throw away? What are you budgeting for? And so on and so forth. So if we jump ahead one slide, where you end usually depends on where you start. Brian did a very nice job earlier of explaining why we look at the world in this sort of bifurcated lens of winners versus everybody else. It's a model that we've been using since day one, and it works really well. One of the things that we used to say when we were trying to explain the concept of winners to people before it became a pretty widespread or widely used term was that winners don't win by accident. They don't just do the same things differently. They tend to do very different things. And so we asked them about their capabilities in their selling environment for the tools and techniques that they have right now, and which they would characterize as having full capability with. We can see a really big delta between them and average and underperforming retailers. More than 3/4 have the ability to optimize local assortments right now to local demand. Now, the use case of that is an entirely different conversation, but they have the ability to optimize assortments based on local tastes, flavors, demographic information, what have you. That's 3/4 to half. That's a big difference. And so on and so forth down the line. Winners have a much greater ability to determine what the optimal order fulfillment location on a per order basis is. We've written entire reports about fulfillment. This is a big deal. They have more than twice the ability to optimize price, promotions, and markdowns. These are the bread and butter 101 terms of retail. What you have, how you price it, how you can get it to where the demand exists. It continues with the fourth data point. What do your stores look like in order to meet local demand? And lastly, even though it's only a 20-point split, in our data, that's a pretty big deal. The fact that winners are much more ability to use analytics as key inputs into their merchandise planning. Again, these are the core tenets. What are you selling? Who are you selling it to? How are you getting it to them? How are you analyzing and making sure that they're happy with the experience? All of these things, winners have a much greater start. And so therefore, it should come as no surprise that when we jump forward and we start looking at investment. So this is a very interesting slide because this is not investment. This is purely about value. This slide exists essentially in the theoretical. And if I was someone who was selling into the retail community, I would say, okay, these are the areas where retailers have identified the greatest promise. They want to be able to combine in the modern era geographic information and demographic information in order to make better decisions. As we all shop more and more irrespective of channels. No one from a consumer point of view thinks about channels. We don't even realize the way we integrate between our phones and our other mobile devices and stores and our PCs and social media networks. We move throughout these things seamlessly. And retailers have said, 80% of them said there'd be a lot of value if we could combine geographic information about where people are in the world and their demographics in order to be able to make better decisions to meet their values. That is highly instructive for how retailers are thinking about this new world, how they plan to be more agile. And on down the list, the blue bars here are probably the ones that are most interesting. If you combine blue and orange, what you find is that there's very little that retailers self-identify as not having a lot of value. I mean, those numbers are minuscule. The largest of them is site analysis at 7%. So on its face, retailers have this enormous appetite for ways that they self-identify to modernize and to be able to meet customer demand. But when we look at the current status of these analyses of location data alone, we can see these numbers start to get a little more realistic. Only 63% of retailers say that they have implemented some way of combining geographic and demographic data for better businesses. So already we have a 20-point gap between where they want to be and where they are, and so on and so forth down the line. So there's been a lot of progress, but there's an awful lot more. And what we can take away from this slide is that if you look at the top three here about where retailers have most implemented technology and where they're most happy, it's really in making sure that they have an assortment that meets customers' needs, that they can market to those people effectively in the ways that they want to be marketed to, not with noise, but with truly valuable promotions and offers. And part of how they plan on doing that is the number one point, is the ability to combine where those people are in the world with who they are. So again, when you think about when we were approaching this report, it seemed like this really daunting task. How are we going to talk about agility and resiliency and sustainability, which, as Brian noted earlier, means a very different thing to retailers, right? It's the ability to fight another day. These technologies are essentially simplified versions of what are you selling, how are you promoting those things, and how are you making sure that you're hitting people where they live and where they shop with those promotions. So let's jump ahead one more slide here. If you are familiar with our work, you know that every time that we write a report, we conclude by putting in recommendations. Yes, the boot methodology that we have, is designed to be a self-contained unit where we first identify what are the internal challenges that all retailers face, what are the opportunities that the best of them are hopefully able to convert from those challenges, what stands in the way, and what technologies carry most favor. But while that's incredibly valuable, we think that we have the right, after our long, illustrious careers before this company, and then in the nearly 2 decades since we've launched it, to make some recommendations about what we think that data really means. So if we jump ahead one slide, Brian already addressed this at the beginning, but it is worth saying again. A wash, rinse, and repeat business model does not work anymore in a customer-facing business. The roadway is littered at this point with plenty of high-profile cases of well-known retailers who failed to adapt. They simply said, this is how we operate. We're going to continue to operate that way. And that is not the evolving nature of our species. So the fact that customer demand has gone wildly unpredictable at the same time that supply chain issues have risen. I was just reading this morning that the drought in the Panama Canal is going to wreak even more havoc on the supply chain for years to come. So the world is becoming more and more unpredictable. We'll leave all the politics out of this, but there can be very little debate that weather-related events and geopolitical events and, God forbid, any sort of other pandemic-related events, retailers recognize they must, and their suppliers realize that they must be prepared for pretty much anything and everything at this point, and that they need to improve their operations if they want to be agile enough to survive, resilient enough to survive, and I mean, it's right there in the word, if they can sustain. So we say this isn't just about winning, it's about surviving. I would imagine probably, 15 years ago, we probably wrote something antithetical to that, where we said it's not just about surviving, it's really about winning. We're in very different times. And one of the things that this report emphasized for us is that the difference between retail winners and other retailers is that the better they are, the stronger their sales are, the more likely they are to view their information asset as a strategic weapon. The data that they are collecting on all frontiers from all sources is the lifeblood of how they plan to do these things, how they plan to become more agile, how they plan to be still around 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. Winners are much more likely to recognize that their sustainable growth is entirely dependent on that data and insights. So they've taken on a lot more efforts to um, purify that data, to guarantee that it can be actionable. Because if you layer technology on top of bad data, all you have done, particularly at the dawn of AI, when that is the conversation on everyone's lips, all you have done is speed up really bad decisions that would have otherwise taken slower to implement. Um, and probably just as important to call out, customer analytics are at the very center of winners' decision-making processes. So it's not just about the data they're collecting from their suppliers and how their products are flowing through their supply chain, but it's also every little thing that they can guarantee that they can gather about the people that are shopping their stores and sites. Um, Second point down here, consumer sustainability concerns are vital to achieving sustainable business growth. We would invite anyone for whom this topic is a Jones to read our store report this year, our merchandise report from this year, um, and also our supply chain report from this year. In all three of those, they were what we call 360-degree studies, where we didn't just survey retailers, we also surveyed consumers. And in all three of those areas, whether it's the supply chain, how products are delivered, whether it's merchandise, what those products are, or whether it's the store and how consumers actually shop stores or lack thereof. Consumers are driving the bus here. They are the ones with enhanced sustainability concerns that far outstrip what most retailers give them credit for. Consumers are, there's a specific set of products for which they have an enhanced focus on the sustainability of how those products come to market, were sourced, and are delivered. Um, for example, consumers are far more interested in the sustainability of something that they're going to either put in their body or on their body than the desk that they might sit at or the chair that they might sit in. It does not mean there are not opportunities across the entire swath of the retail ecosystem. What it means is consumers are going to be demanding at an increasing rate a better story from retailers about the products they're selling and how those products got to either the consumer's door or the store shelf. Um, we invite everyone who has an interest in that to read those three reports, because each one goes in deeply as to what some of those better stories look like, how retailers can tell those stories with more conviction, and not just tell them, for the sake of having a stamp to slap on it and say, here's a green product to make you feel better, but to truly allow consumers the opportunity to choose between product A and product B, fully understanding the carbon footprint, the resources required, the lifespan of what it took I mean, it goes into carbon footprint, obviously, all of it does, but what it took to get that product into their hands. That is what consumers are craving. And the retailer that can help deliver that faster has a competitive advantage over those who are just merely telling a story for the sake of telling a story. Consumers want real actionable information here. They don't want to have to do all the research. They want to do the retailer to do some of the listing and to do some of the legwork and make it easier for them. And we think there's a real path there to achieving sustainable business growth by having a more sustainable story to tell. The third point down, IT investments are overdue. I think we beat that one pretty hard. Again, it's part of our mission is to be encouraging without being discouraging to retailers, because we come from that world. We are former retailers, and we understand that margins are small and budgets are small and pressure is high to make the right decision. No one wants to stick their neck out for an IT investment that doesn't deliver immediately in a meaningful way. However, the flip side of that is that because this is also part of our profession, and because we take briefings with technologists day in and day out, we can say that a lot of these fears and skepticisms about technologies not working the way people might have been able to lean on that 5 or 6 years ago, the way vendors promised them to work, is really not founded. Some of these things are quite simply astonishing, and make anyone from the merchant to the call center to the store itself, make anyone's job both easier and more relevant for an experience that matters to consumers. We always say keep your eyes on the supply chain. We've been calling the supply chain the next best thing for probably, or the next big thing for probably 15 years at this point. I can't imagine a year where we don't keep our eyes on the supply chain. But the fact that retailers, again, not necessarily for, not brought there by their own choosing, but because of some of the instability in the world in the last few years, it's certainly a top of mind capability for retailers, and they recognize can't sell what you don't have, can't sell what you can't promise, and you have to know what you're selling, where it is, how you can get it, how soon you can get it, because consumers have indeed lost a tremendous amount of patience. They do not have apathy for retailers. They just want to know, where's my stuff? Um, this next point down, scenario planning and predictive modeling is vital. Again, we're not trying to just get everyone to read everything we've ever written, but we did do a KPIs report recently. And one of the key takeaways from that is retailers are enamored of scenario planning. What if are probably the two most powerful words right now in retail. What if we did this? What if we did that? They want to model things out before they take any sort of leap. And the really good news is that the tech industry has been working on modeling tools for quite some time now and has really made enormous strides in technologies that enable that very thing. So, regardless of where you are in any conversation that you might be having as a retailer with a technologist, we would ask, we would suggest that you ask them to show you very quickly in that conversation, what does scenario planning look like? Because it's vital to virtually all of the functions within the area of research that we studied here. Second to last, consumers are talking, and it's important to pay attention. Um, Probably beat this one pretty loudly as well. But winners really do um, make they have a tremendous advantage over everyone else in how long they've been leveraging customer analytics in a very real way. It's a key component to their growth. I think the number was, 3 to 4, 3/4 to 1/2 or something like that a few slides ago. Um, we hope that when we conduct this survey a year from now, we see a lot more average and underperforming retailers who have placed just as much attention on customer analytics, ensuring that those analytics are insightful and actionable, and then just as importantly, having those actions look like to see how quickly they are. In a term that gets overused, the goal here is to fail fast. If you try something and it doesn't work, you want to know about it as quickly as possible. And lastly, we say don't give up on efficiency. There was an awful lot of talk about efficiency in the supply chain for a great number of years while we were around. And then, of course, when March of 2020 rolled along, everyone said efficiency is no longer the key. We have to be agile. It's not just about having things that are just in time, ready for something just in time, ready for something just in time, because at any little disruption in that supply chain, all hell could break loose. That is certainly the case. But there is a difference between preparing a supply chain network that is built purely for the exception and one that takes into mind that there are rules here. There is efficiency still to be gained. We have not wrung all of it out of the supply chain. And those two things can genuinely exist in one head at the same time. So we ask retailers, don't just run as far as you possibly can towards agility without a thought towards efficiency, because if we need a very real world practical case of that, buy online, return on stores, and where retailers are right now with that is a perfect example of what happens when we don't give much mind share to efficiency. Because as we can all probably recall, when stores closed and we were not allowed to shop the way we wanted to, and people had to be able to buy online and pick up in parking lots and return the 10 things that they ordered online because they couldn't go to a store and try something on and go to their local store and keep one and return the 9 that they didn't need. Retailers pretty quickly cobbled together the ability to meet that need, but without much efficiency. And we've spent the last 3 years trying to bring efficiency into that model. We would advise so that we don't have to retrofit things and go back and make things that, kind of work, undo what we've done to redo. Just keep efficiency in mind as we're still striving towards agility. And with that, I believe we've concluded our replay here of this report itself. The full report, Agility, Resiliency, and Sustainability as a Strategy in Consumer-Facing Businesses, is available, like everything we write, for free on our website. Um, Obviously, want to thank the folks at IORMA for partnering with us here, for making this possible. If you did find this valuable, you can download not just this report, but one of any of the 12 or 10 that we write each year, as well as the fairly routine, bi-weekly newsletter that we put out, where we opine on what we see in the industry. So hope this has been valuable for everyone. Really appreciate your time. And thanks to IORMA for being such a great partner.